Welcome into Jake and Joshua, where we sound off on some of the biggest topics in Big Ten football. And it seems like every week we got to talk about your alma mater, the Michigan Wolverines, but they're taking that trip over to Kinnick this week. It is a noon game, so you don't get that nighttime Kinnick. But are you expecting maybe anything fluky going on here? We know that Iowa has a history of challenging top 5 teams when they come to town.
I believe in magic because of some of the things I've seen when ranked teams go into Iowa, go into Kinnick. Just magic happens. And you mentioned it. 5 out of their last 6 games versus AP top 5 teams, going back to 2008, they've won.
Yeah.
The difference this year that makes me feel as a Michigan fan, but also an analyst, that makes me feel better about this matchup is that Iowa offense is almost non-existent. And when I played them in 2016, we were one of those teams that lost. We were number 2. But they at least had weapons and they had an offensive identity that the reason we lost was more so about their offense's ability to sustain drives and control the clock and lull you to sleep. I don't know that they're going to be able to do that on a consistent basis, and that's a big piece of why they've been able to upset teams.
Yeah, I mean, I watched my Buckeyes travel in there and get upset too, so I know that thing is real. I'm with you 100% of the way. You look at this Iowa offense, and even with the performance that they had a week ago, I think it was more, do you get the ball in territory where you can score because your defense is taking it away? A lot of those points came on the scoreboard because of the defense. The offense certainly needs to take a step if they want to compete. And if I'm thinking about a number where, if you're a Michigan fan, you can feel comfortable about this game, it's feeling like 17.
Agreed.
17 points, you feel like you can win that football game. And it's kind of wild to say the way that we see some of these high-flying offenses in college football. The biggest thing that I'm looking for out of the Michigan Wolverines in this football game is J.J. McCarthy being a mature, patient quarterback. Because the way that this Iowa defense is set up, they don't do a lot of tricky things. They don't do anything fancy. They play fundamental football. They want to see if you can be patient all the way down the field. And if you try to take that shot, they're going to give you their best shot and try to take the football away. So McCarthy, big maturity game right here.
100%. So 17 points, I would say that's a fair number. What happens outside of that is the key to the game. Because if your punter's on the field and you're making that Iowa offense drive 80-plus yards, you feel good. But if it's 17 points and you have a couple turnovers, that Iowa's defense, man, they're going to make the plays. I mean, you see defensive backs catching the ball better than some receivers. It's insane. Agree. But if you can give that Iowa offense a short field, they're good enough that they're going to put up points. So as long as JJ, like you said, big maturity game, play clean, trust himself, trust in your players. You don't have to score every time down there. So make the throws when they're there, but don't put yourself in a vulnerable position. I think Michigan just has too much firepower. They should win this game. But a lot of teams should beat Iowa in Kinnick, so that's why you play the game.
That's exactly why you play the game. There have been a lot of results this year that have been surprising to football fans across the board. I wanted to ask you about another team that I think we were both high on coming into the season, but has proven to many people that they are as advertised, and that's the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I was on the call for their game in East Lansing against Michigan State, and they came out there and executed their game plan to a T. Whatever they wanted to get in that game, they got it. Started off throwing the football, and it was nothing too explosive down the field. I don't think they had more than 2 or 3 plays that went for 20-plus yards in that game, but it was very efficient, very effective, kept the chains moving. And then defensively, they're barely on the field, but that is a phenomenal defense. And it was a year ago and nobody talked about it. Now people are starting to see it. Clear path in the West, in my mind. This team is going to end up in Indy.
I agree. I mean, that to me, I called their spring game way back when. And in talking to Joe Rossi, their defensive coordinator, I came away saying that guy should be a head coach one day. He's one of the more underrated assistant coaches in the entire conference. You never hear his name brought up as one of the better defensive coordinators. I don't know why, because he's consistently done it. The sneakiest hire of the offseason was bringing Kirk Shiraka back.
It was a great thing.
You can just feel, sure you can see the stats, but just observe the way Tanner Morgan sits in the pocket and makes throws. He just feels so much more comfortable. And of course, Mo Ibrahim is back from injury and he looks 100%. So they're just playing clean, efficient football. Chris Hoffman-Bell went down. Other guys stepped up.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of a good football team. You mentioned the schedule. It lies really favorable for them. One thing I would say about Minnesota is I think they're not necessarily getting the respect they deserve in the AP poll. I'm cool with that. If I'm a Minnesota fan, I'm cool with that. It's a different game when you can go pitch to your team, hey, we're being disrespected. We should be up there. Whereas if you get in the top 10 a little too early, now the target's on your back.
Yeah.
So I think the stars are aligning for Minnesota.
Yeah, and PJ Fleck is a guy who totally embraces the fact that nobody's talking about them because it's about what he does within that building anyway. So that plays right into their hands. You mentioned Chris Ottman-Bell being out and how other guys at wide receivers stepped up. And this is not a knock on Chris Ottman-Bell. This is it's praise for the program. They cycle guys through. Mm-hmm. They fit the system. They develop players. They work with all those guys. I've been to their practices. This is some of the best practices that I get to see. Everybody's getting valuable reps out there. And so it's not shocking to me that you lose one of your best players and somebody else is right there ready to take the torch. Mentioned the crossover games, but they just played Michigan State and absolutely throttled them. I believe they have Penn State and they've got Rutgers as well as a crossover. Like the schedule, it feels like it sets up. So Golden Gopher should be a lot fun to watch as the season comes to an end here.
That was my season pick. Yeah. I said it at Media Days. Wisconsin was the overwhelming favorite. I'm like, guys, and I'm okay with that. Wisconsin certainly deserves their respect, but I just think Minnesota's a more complete team.
There it is. All right, that was Jake and Joshua. We'll catch you next time.